What if your future could be predicted by a machine? Scratch that. What if your freedom could be taken away by one? In 2025, artificial intelligence is no longer just automating shopping carts or recommending movies. It's being used in the justice system to help determine who goes to jail for how long and whether they ever get a second chance. Governments around the world are turning to AI tools in hopes of improving the speed, consistency, and efficiency of criminal justice. But as these systems expand, we have to ask, can AI really be fair? Can it understand nuance, remorse, or transformation? Or are we building a future where justice is reduced to math? In this series, we'll explore how AI is reshaping justice in China and the United States, two superpowers with different goals, but a shared interest in automating legal decisions. Welcome to the age of algorithmic justice. China's Smart Court initiative didn't start as a dystopian project. It began as a modernization effort. Over the past decade, the Chinese legal system has faced immense pressure. A rapidly growing economy, urbanization, and tens of millions of new civil and criminal cases flooding the courts each year. Judges were overwhelmed. Delays were common. Errors happened. China's Supreme People's Court launched a national campaign to create digitally integrated, AI-powered courts. Let's look at the brains behind the Smart Court. Two core systems, Xiao Baogong, Little Judge, and Xiaoji 3.0, Little Wisdom. Xiao Baogong focuses on criminal justice. It helps prosecutors and judges by suggesting penalties, cross-referencing past rulings, and even analyzing legal arguments in real time. It doesn't just find cases that are similar. It explains why they're similar and recommends what the punishment should be. Xiaoji 3.0 handles courtroom logistics. It transcribes speech instantly. It accesses legal databases, identifies contradictions in testimonies, and flags incomplete documents during live proceedings. In one real-world example, Xiaoji helped resolve 10 financial disputes in 30 minutes, a process that previously required 10 separate trials. Lawyers, judges, and clerks work together with the AI, not against it. Sounds efficient, right? But here's the question. If an AI suggests a sentence, how often does the judge just agree with it? And if 80% of the rulings now reflect AI suggestions, are judges really still judging? Automation may be a powerful assistant, but is it quietly becoming the decision maker? Now let's cross the ocean to the United States, where the role of AI is less about sentencing and more about crime prediction. One of the most talked about tools is a crime forecasting algorithm developed at the University of Chicago. It claims to predict where crimes are most likely to occur within a week's time and with up to 90% accuracy. How does it work? The city is divided into microgrids. Data from past crimes, arrests, time of day, and even weather is fed into a model that predicts which areas are likely to see illegal activity next. Police departments use this to deploy officers more efficiently, reduce response time, and, in theory, prevent crime before it happens. But this raises huge questions. What's the difference between predicting crime and profiling neighborhoods? What happens when these systems flag the same streets again and again, regardless of actual danger? And perhaps more importantly, who decides what data gets used? Because in AI, the past determines the future. That brings us to the next issue. Here's the hidden danger in predictive policing. It's a feedback loop. Let's break it down, AI says. Area B has a high risk of theft next week. Police patrol Area B more. They make more arrests, maybe for minor violations or unrelated issues. This data is fed back into the system. AI says, C. More crime happened there. It recommends even more patrols. Now imagine that pattern repeating for months, even years. Suddenly, a neighborhood becomes statistically dangerous not because of actual crime, but because of how the system was trained to look. This is where policing becomes policing of perception. The model isn't detecting more crime, it's detecting more enforcement. Communities with fewer resources or greater visibility become targets, not because they're more dangerous, but because they've been under the microscope longer. This creates a cycle that's hard to escape. And worse, it gives AI the illusion of accuracy. Inside US courtrooms, AI doesn't stop at predictions. It goes straight to sentencing. Meet Compass, an algorithm used in bail hearings and parole boards. It scores defendants based on how likely they are to reoffend. Another system, LSIR, uses a long questionnaire to assess risk based on factors like criminal history, employment, family background, and peer associations. Sounds fair? On paper, maybe. But here's the catch. Most of these variables aren't directly about the crime itself. They reflect environment, poverty, instability, things that often affect marginalized groups more severely. And because the algorithm uses past data, including arrest records, it can reflect systemic inequalities even when no explicit bias exists in the code. Once that score is generated, it follows a person through multiple stages of the legal process. Judges might refer to it when setting bail. Parole officers might use it when making release decisions. But what if the score is wrong? The selling point of these tools is consistency. But let's look at the facts. Compass is only about 66% accurate. That's just slightly better than flipping a coin. In one study, people labeled high risk were actually less likely to reoffend than those labeled low risk. In another study, over 50,000 cases in Virginia, judges were less likely to follow AI recommendations when dealing with minority defendants, leading to longer sentences. So even when AI tries to be neutral, human inconsistency reintroduces bias. It gets worse with young people. In jurisdictions using risk assessments, those under 23 saw longer sentences, simply because their age was flagged as high risk. These tools aren't built to understand the human story. They're built to sort, score, and simplify. And justice is never simple. As AI gets more embedded in the courtroom, a major debate is heating up. Should a machine ever decide your fate? Supporters argue that AI removes emotion, bias, and inconsistency. They say it helps overworked judges make more informed, data-backed decisions. But critics ask, what about compassion? What about second chances? What about context? Things no spreadsheet can calculate. In March 2025, Virginia Delegate Cliff Hayes Jr. introduced a bill requiring that humans must make the final decision, especially in pretrial detention, sentencing, and parole. He warned AI may help, but when it fails big. Because here's the truth, no one votes for an algorithm. No one can put it on trial, and when it makes a bad call, who's responsible? Even if an algorithm doesn't intend to be biased, it can inherit bias from its training data. If police have historically made more arrests in certain neighborhoods, that data will make those neighborhoods appear riskier, even if the real crime rates are the same elsewhere. This isn't about malice, it's about mathematical inheritance. One study found that probation recommendations were ignored more often when defendants came from minority communities, even when the AI suggested leniency. So the AI wasn't biased, but the human system around it still was. Bias can enter at 3 levels: input data, historical inequality, algorithm design, what gets prioritized, and output interpretation, how humans use the results. Fixing bias in AI isn't just about writing better code. It's about fixing the system it reflects. Imagine being scored as high risk because you're 19, unemployed, or have prior arrests, even if you were never convicted. That's exactly what happens with many risk assessment tools. They take factors that correlate with crime and treat them as causes. But correlation isn't destiny. A young person who made a mistake should have the opportunity to grow. An unemployed individual might just be someone who lost a job, not a threat to society. When we reduce people to checkboxes, we strip them of narrative, growth, and change. Justice should look forward. But these systems often look backward. So, is all of this a reason to ditch AI and justice entirely? Not necessarily. Experts suggest several reforms: transparency, make AI systems open source and auditable, human oversight, always keep a judge in control, bias testing, regular audits to detect discrimination, feedback loops, systems that learn from real-world outcomes. Done right, AI can support fairness, reduce delays, and help detect patterns humans might miss. But done wrong, it can reinforce everything we're trying to fix. AI and justice isn't just a tech issue, it's a moral one. What do we want justice to be? Fast and efficient, or compassionate and careful? Objective and mathematical, or rooted in human experience? We are building systems right now that will decide freedom, punishments, and redemption for generations. We must ask, should we ever outsource moral judgment to machines? And if we do, what's the cost?